Section 3. Gender and Climate Change, a Framework for Action. Learn more about how gender considerations have been integrated into international commitments, national policies, projects, and local initiatives to address climate change more effectively. Gender mainstreaming. Let's click on the triangles to explore the different levels. International. The United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC. The UNFCCC is an international climate change treaty adopted in 1992 that is endorsed by 197 parties. UNFCCC's ultimate objective is to stabilize greenhouse gas concentrations at a level that would prevent dangerous anthropogenic, human-induced interference with the climate system. The Paris Agreement furthers the Convention's objective by strengthening the global response to the threat of climate change. This is achieved by keeping this century's global temperature well below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, while pursuing efforts to limit the temperature increase even further to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Additionally, the agreement aims to strengthen the ability of countries to deal with the impacts of climate change. How has gender been integrated as part of the UNFCCC framework? 2001. The first mention of gender was at the COP7 in a decision that called for increasing participation of women in the representation of parties in bodies established under UNFCCC or the Kyoto Protocol. Decision 36/CP-7. 2010. The Cancun Agreements highlight the importance of gender considerations in adaptation, technology, capacity building and REDD+. Decision 1/CP-16. 2012. COP18 was a landmark negotiation that resulted in a significant step towards the goal of gender balance under the Convention and Kyoto Protocol, the creation of a standing agenda item on gender and climate change, and the establishment of an annual reporting mechanism on progress towards the goal of gender balance. Decision 23/CP-18. 2014. A 2-year plan of work was established, known as the Lima Work Programme on Gender. Decision 18/CP-20. 2015. The Paris Agreement took action to address climate change and to respect, promote and consider gender equality, the empowerment of women and intergenerational equity. Decision 21/CP-22. 2016. 160 submitted intended nationally determined contributions, INDCs. 38% of these national climate plans explicitly mention women or gender. The Lima Work Programme on Gender is extended and enhanced to 2019, including an invitation to countries to nominate a national gender and climate change focal point and a mandate to develop a gender action plan in 2017. 2017. The Gender Action Plan under the UNFCCC was adopted at COP23. Its objective is to support the implementation of gender-related decisions and mandates in the UNFCCC process, with activities identified for the next 2 years grouped under 5 priority areas. Priority areas: adaptation, mitigation, capacity building, climate finance, technology. Let's look at adaptation. The ability of communities to adapt to climate change is inextricably linked to their ability to exercise their fundamental human rights, their socio-economic conditions, their access to knowledge and resources, and the health of the ecosystems they depend on for their livelihoods and well-being. Adaptation initiatives need to be gender sensitive. The gender adaptation link was made by the UNFCCC in connection to specific actions, such as the inclusion of gender equality in National Adaptation Programmes of Action, NAPAs, enhancing the climate change resilience of vulnerable communities, and the implementation of gender-sensitive tools in water and ecosystem-based approaches. Let's look at mitigation. Energy production and consumption account for an estimated 2/3 of global GHG emissions. In their capacity as community leaders, farmers, entrepreneurs, producers, and household managers, women can contribute to the environmental, economic, and social benefits of reducing such emissions. Recognizing them as users of energy and acknowledging their potential as providers and decision makers will result in increased opportunities for women and men to fully benefit from this sector's economic and investment solutions. While the international community increasingly recognizes that gender mainstreaming in the energy sector supports mitigation and strengthens gender equality, there have been limited examples of gender-responsive mitigation initiatives so far. Let's take a look at capacity building. Women can play a major role as agents of capacity development via networking and transmission of knowledge. The UNFCCC highlights the importance of women in all areas of capacity building, including all levels of climate change policy making, planning and project development. To strengthen women's and men's capacities for better adaptation to and mitigation of climate change, the implementation of existing policies is needed, as well as the allocation of resources and the reinforcement of women's participation across all institutional levels. Let's take a look at climate finance. Women's direct participation in climate change decision-making. Including women in the governing bodies of climate finance mechanisms is essential to effectively and equitably design, implement and fund climate solutions. Also, direct financing lines for women entrepreneurs can foster innovation. Women bring unique perspectives and skills that are beneficial for effective adaptation and mitigation. Gender-responsive financing. Climate finance mechanisms that do not take into account gender disparities could exacerbate them. By taking a gender-responsive approach, climate finance can promote gender equality and empower women. Under the UNFCCC, the entities providing climate financing are the Green Climate Fund, GCF. Their programs require the inclusion of a gender action plan. The Global Environment Facility, GEF, guided by the Policy on Gender Equality. Clean Development Mechanism, CDM. Adaptation Fund, AF. As of 2015, women on average made up just 24% of the boards of major multilateral climate finance mechanisms. 15% in the Green Climate Fund, 25% in the Global Environment Facility, 26% in Climate Investment Funds, and 35% in the Adaptation Fund. Let's take a look at technology. To adapt to changing environmental realities, women's access to climate-responsive technologies needs to be facilitated. Women's ability to deal with climate change is still a largely untapped resource. Low emission initiatives can be more efficient if the design process is gender responsive. There's an example here from the energy sector. Let's take a look. In the energy sector, where technology plays a key role, men tend to focus their efforts on commercial and large-scale industrial development, whereas women tend to be more involved in energy solutions for households and communities. How to add a gender perspective to climate change actions. 1. Ensure equal participation of women and men in the development and implementation of local climate change adaptation and mitigation plans. 2. Strengthen the capacity of environmental agencies and other stakeholders to ensure that women and men benefit equitably from climate change adaptation and mitigation investments. 3. Increase the capacity of environmental agencies and other stakeholders to consult with women and men on climate change impacts and respond to women's and men's needs and priorities. The understanding of various impacts of climate change and adaptation and mitigation strategies on women and men living in poverty. 4. Determine specific activities that address gender inequalities related to climate change. For example, via promoting women and youth empowerment at all levels, economic, social, political, and physical, and by enhancing their access to water, energy, and decision-making processes at different levels, and addressing stereotypes through awareness creation. 5. Assess adaptation and mitigation technologies for their gender responsiveness. All adaptation and mitigation aspects, such as transport and promotion of biofuels, must be assessed from a gender perspective to ensure that inequalities between women and men and rich and poor are not perpetuated. 6. Take gender-conscious steps to reduce adverse impacts of natural disasters on women and men, particularly in relation to their critical roles in the provision of water, food, and energy in rural areas. 7. Adopt a household members approach to ensure that all members are adequately involved in decision-making related to them. For example, when necessary, in resettlement cases related to water development or in contracted farming, both spouses should be aware and involved in decision-making. 8. Use GAL's Gender Action Learning System and household methodologies as a community-led empowerment methodology with specific participatory processes and tools which aim to give women, as well as men, more control over their lives as the basis for individual, household, community, and organizational development, including for climate change-related actions. 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. It recognizes that realizing gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls will make a crucial contribution to progress across all sustainable development goals. Key goals linked to climate change are listed below. 5. Gender equality outlines the importance of gender equality and empowerment of all women and girls. 6. Clean water and sanitation ensures availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. 7. Affordable and clean energy guarantees access to affordable, reliable, sustainable and modern energy for all. 13. Climate action requires taking urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. International to national. Intended nationally determined contributions. INDCs. Intended nationally determined contributions. INDCs are the communicated commitments by UNFCCC parties, outlining their national ambitions to reduce GHG emissions. They link a country's climate mitigation and adaptation actions with national priorities to drive progress in addressing climate change. As countries formally join the Paris Agreement, the actions are no longer intended and become nationally determined contributions, NDCs. As these climate plans affect a country's entire economy and have long-term consequences, it is critical that countries take gender considerations into account when developing and implementing these plans to meet the different needs and perspectives of both women and men, and to make the policy and its action more effective. It is also crucial in guaranteeing the fair and equitable participation of women and men. Good practices intended nationally determined contributions. Mexico. Policies and actions as part of the INDC will include a cross-cutting human rights and gender perspectives for the measures to be implemented to take into account women as important decision makers regarding energy consumption. They also emphasize the importance of implementing them, that they do not exacerbate the impacts of climate change that already have disproportionate adverse effects based solely on gender. Nigeria's INDC mentions that women rely on biomass energy sources and are therefore exposed to dangerous air pollutants. The INDC also acknowledges that women have less access to financial institutions and agricultural services than their male counterparts. Ethiopia's long-term plan for adaptation aims to integrate actions that improve the status of women and the welfare of children. Kiribati's INDC states that the effects and consequences of climate change are experienced first and most acutely by vulnerable groups, including women. Case study: the NDC Support Programme. The NDC Support Programme was launched at COP23 by UNDP, the governments of Germany and Spain, and the European Union to help countries dive deeper into the implementation of their national climate plans. Its gender-responsive component will conduct a pilot in 10 countries to demonstrate that connecting the interlinked processes of climate change and gender equality and women's empowerment at the national level through NDC implementation will promote inclusive and successful outcomes in both areas. The programme will mainstream gender in 3 areas: governance, planning, and policy. It will leverage analysis, strengthen institutional mechanisms, ensure gender-responsive climate change actions, and disseminate best practices. Gender-responsive projects. Let's click on the boxes to know more about gender-responsive stakeholder consultations, gender analysis, gender-responsive actions, gender-responsive monitoring and evaluation. Let's start on gender-responsive stakeholder consultations. These identify women and men likely to be affected by the project activities and ensure equal participation and decision-making opportunities across the project cycle through inclusive and gender-responsive stakeholder consultations. Gender analysis: collection and analysis of sex disaggregated data and gender information to inform project design, implementation, monitoring and evaluation. Gender responsive actions: project activities proactively address gender differences and promote gender equality and women's empowerment. Gender responsive monitoring and evaluation: identify and incorporate gender-sensitive indicators and targets to measure project results in monitoring, evaluation, reporting, and learning. Good practices at the project level. Let's click on the pins to access case studies of gender-responsive projects and initiatives addressing climate change. Climate finance. 6 countries. Achieving food and nutritional security through gender-responsive approaches. Issue. As agricultural production is affected by climate change, food supplies become more insecure. As farmers, harvesters, processors, and consumers, women are often the first to be exposed to climate change. They also have to spend an increasing amount of time securing water, food, and fuel for cooking and heating. Action. The Canada UNDP Climate Change Adaptation Facility, with support from the Government of Canada and the GEF's Least Developed Countries Fund, took action across Cabo Verde, Cambodia, Haiti, Mali, Niger, and Sudan to implement gender-responsive approaches to climate change adaptation. In particular, it helped women to increase food production and overcome water scarcity through rehabilitation of water harvesting systems. Context-specific measures were promoted, ranging from new agricultural practices to ensuring gender-equitable land tenure and reinforcing women's networks. Impact. Across all 6 countries, CCAF projects have contributed to increased agricultural outcomes and supported women as food producers. Women managed to diversify their livelihoods and had a significant role in both designing and implementing climate-resilient activities, becoming key actors of change. Adaptation. Mali. Gender-responsive integration of climate change adaptation in local planning. Issue. In Mali, women's income-generating activities include gardening and processing of non-timber forest products. Men typically focus on growing cash crops. With less frequent rains due to climate change, these crops will suffer, putting more pressure on women's productive activities, as well as increasing the time they need to fetch water and firewood. Action. To reduce the risks that climate change poses on livelihoods and food security, the Mali National Directorate of Agriculture partnered with UNDP to strengthen agricultural resilience in 4 municipalities. With support from the Government of Canada and the GEF's Least Developed Countries Fund, the project, titled Enhancing Adaptive Capacity and Resilience to Climate Change in the Agriculture Sector in Mali, focused on empowering women as drivers of adaptation. Impact. A solar energy platform was provided to a women's collective to help to grind flour, a very time-intensive process in meal preparation. This enables women to focus on other activities providing alternative income. Training on sustainable agricultural practices, the provision of seeds and tools, and the establishment of revolving funds complemented the support. The project also strives to better integrate climate change and related gender considerations into municipal level policies and plans. Capacity building. Spain. Otro tiempo, otro planeta. Energy and pollution. Issue. In Spain, the waste produced by the oil used for daily cooking represents an important environmental issue. Its inadequate disposal can have harmful impacts, such as hindering sewage treatment and polluting ecosystems. At the same time, women who have been victims of gender-based violence expressed an interest in new opportunities to rebuild their lives. Action. By collecting used cooking oil, the Otro Tiempo, Otro Planeta initiative seeks to create employment from the social economy. Its objective is to empower women economically and socially and to develop a locally organized waste disposal system for used cooking oil to be transformed into biodiesel. This creates jobs for women who have been victims of gender violence, while contributing to the reduction of water pollution and carbon dioxide emissions. Impact. Around 34 tonnes of cooking oil waste produced 30,473 litres of biodiesel. This produces 86% less GHG than petrol. Also, women who were victims of gender violence were empowered economically and improved their living conditions. Technology, Sweden. Community wind farm project and women's empowerment. Energy. Issue. In 2007, Wanja Valmer, a female farmer and activist living in rural Sweden, wanted to invest in a community wind farm but could not afford the initial minimum investment of $154,000. Recognizing that the energy sector is dominated by men, but also that opportunities exist to increase women's involvement in the industry, Valmer and 9 others gathered funds to invest in the community wind farm project named Kvinnor Vindar. Action. Kvinnor Vindar focuses on the equal representation of all of its members, regardless of the members' initial investment, therefore implementing inclusive business practices by including women from all fields of work to be part of the cooperative. Impact. Women were empowered economically to enter the energy market, and to date, Kvinnor Vindar has invested more than $1.5 million in other wind and clean energy projects in Sweden. Mitigation, 6 countries. CBR Plus, grants to indigenous peoples and forest communities. A case study. Issue. Forests support the livelihoods of 500 million people, providing food, fuel, fodder for livestock, medicine and shelter. Therefore, deforestation and forest degradation considerably affect forest-dependent communities and indigenous peoples, while causing the release of carbon dioxide, CO2, into the atmosphere. Action. CBR Plus is a partnership between the UN REDD programme and the GEF Small Grants Programme, implemented by UNDP, delivering grants directly to indigenous peoples and forest communities. The project aims to empower such communities to fully engage in REDD+, including, among others, better definition of land use rights and development of benefit sharing mechanisms. Gender considerations are part of the criteria for project selection and monitoring. Also, guidance is provided to each pilot country to ensure gender equality principles are promoted within the design and implementation of their CBR Plus country plans. Impact. During the pilot phase, 2014 to 2017, CBR Plus was implemented in 6 pilot countries: Paraguay, Panama, Nigeria, Democratic Republic of Congo, Cambodia and Sri Lanka. In DRC, Nigeria, Cambodia and Sri Lanka, gender considerations were integrated in the outputs defined in the country plans. Women were specifically identified as key stakeholders in 5 plans: Cambodia, Sri Lanka, DRC, Nigeria and Paraguay. Gender and environmental initiatives for local communities. Pakistan. The Aga Khan Planning and Building Service, AKPBS, in Pakistan, supported by UNDP and GEF. Let's watch this video on good practice.
the remote mountains of northern Pakistan, where the vast ranges of the Hindu Kush, Karakoram and Himalaya meet. Isolated with harsh winters, where there were once trees, there are now only rocks. Deforestation is a major problem here. Most people burn wood for cooking and heating. Their poorly insulated homes need a lot of wood to keep them warm. So the houses fill with smoke, a major cause of respiratory and eye disease. Chambeli lives with her 4 children and husband in the village of Pakora.
Before we used lots of wood. We used to go far to collect it, but we use much less now.
Like many others in her village, Chambeli's home is now much warmer. She has a cleaner, more efficient stove with a chimney.
There used to be a lot of smoke, and because of that, we had sore eyes, aching chests, and our clothes were covered with soot. We had to warm water in a pot, using even more firewood. But now, water is warmed in the barrel for dishes, laundry, bathing, for everything.
There's insulating foam on the floor, making it warmer and more comfortable. The chimney removes all the smoke, so the traditional hole in the roof can be covered by a hatch window. It keeps in warmth, lets in light, and allows in fresh air when required. The products were developed by the Aga Khan Planning and Building Service Pakistan, part of the wider Aga Khan Development Network. In 1997, they started the Building and Construction Improvement Programme, or BASIP. In these isolated mountain communities, families have to grow all their own fuel wood. The challenge for BASIP was how to make people aware of their fuel-efficient products. So they recruited local role models like Bibi Safina. They call them resource people.
When I started with BASIP, I used to go door to door telling people about the products. I would record the orders and pass them on to BASIP.
Today, Bibi holds meetings in her home to promote the products.
Most of the BASIP products are women-centered. These are the products which have been helpful in saving the time of women, which they spend to fetch the water, which they spend to collect the firewood. So these resource persons, they have been asset for the community, and we were able to make the local women to decide on their own for the adoption of BASIP products.
At first, resource people like Bibi worked voluntarily, but as their workload increased, BASIP started to pay them a modest income.
I get 10% commission from every sale. Gradually, I have gained more and more business experience. Now I have also started a business of my own, so my standard of living is really good now.
When Bibi signs up a new customer, she liaises with BASIP so products can be sourced from local manufacturers. BASIP trains these entrepreneurs. They teach them how to make the products to a good standard, able to pass BASIP's quality control. They also supply tools and arrange startup loans.
BASIP invited me for training, so I went to the town for a week. Then I came back here and started work. I began training others, around 25 people, and they are now working here too. I also earn more money from my machinery, which BASIP also helped me to install. So now I have both good machines and several employees. I used to earn 150 to 200 rupees a day. Now I earn 1,000.
The stoves are also made locally. This metal worker used to make a couple of hundred stoves a year. Now he makes 2,500.
The whole notion is to ensure that there's enough trained entrepreneurs within the communities so that they are able to meet the ongoing demand and make it a market-based model, that these entrepreneurs make a good business out of it. So it's a business model for continuity and for sustainability.
Wall and ceiling insulation also helps to keep schools, other buildings and homes warm, even in the middle of winter. BASIP continues to innovate and expand its reach, holding roadshows to introduce new communities to its products.
All's good now. The children are happy, we are happy, the house is clean and we have warm water. There's no smoke. Before we had a different life, now it is completely changed.
Be considered to achieve sustainable results. The international community has taken steps to support women's empowerment to participate in the response to climate change. Module summary. The causes and consequences of climate change are not gender neutral. Climate change also exacerbates existing inequalities. Understanding and addressing the roles, responsibilities, power relations, and access to resources are primary requirements for combating the effects of climate change. Women represent a pipeline of talent and ideas. Their agency and leadership are essential to the solutions to climate change. There are concrete frameworks to mainstream gender from international to local level that also help to address climate change more effectively.